Step back in time to the golden era of toys, the 60s and 70s, when imagination ruled and playtime was pure magic. From dolls that could chat to cars that raced across tracks, these toys weren't just fun. They sparked creativity, shaped childhoods, and in some cases, became cultural icons. Today, we're diving into some of the most unforgettable toys that defined a generation, exploring why they captured hearts then and why they're still loved today. Get ready to relive the wonder of vintage playtime. When you think of toys that defined an entire era, Barbie stands at the top. Introduced in 1959, she wasn't just another doll on the shelf, she was a revolution. Before Barbie, dolls were almost always babies, built around the idea of practicing motherhood. But Barbie changed the game. She was grown up, fashionable, and independent, inviting kids to imagine a future beyond the home. By the 1960s, Barbie had exploded into a cultural phenomenon. She came with a dazzling range of outfits, evening gowns, career uniforms, swimwear, even casual weekend looks. Accessory packs let kids build entire worlds, cars, houses, endless wardrobes. Owning a Barbie wasn't just about playing, it felt like tapping into a lifestyle. Kids were no longer just taking care of dolls. They were projecting dreams, ambitions, and identities onto them. What made Barbie especially groundbreaking was her ability to step into roles women were only beginning to occupy in real life. She was a nurse, a teacher, a fashion model, and even an astronaut, 4 years before Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. For a generation of children, Barbie suggested that the future could hold almost anything. Of course, controversy followed. Critics argued her proportions created unrealistic expectations, a debate that still sparks today. However, all that is water under the bridge. Barbie symbolized independence, possibility, and choice, and she was the absolute must-have for children in the 60s. When kids unwrapped that pink box under the Christmas tree, it wasn't just a toy. It was a ticket into imagination. And the fact that Barbie still thrives today proves her impact was never a fad, but it was the beginning of a cultural movement. In 1967, Hasbro introduced Lite-Brite, a product that transformed living rooms into glowing art studios. At first glance, it was just a light box and a pile of tiny colored pegs. But once you push those pegs into the black paper templates and flip the switch, your creation lit up like a neon sign. For kids in the late 60s and 70s, it felt like pure magic. The genius of Lite-Brite was its simplicity. You didn't need to be an artist to enjoy it. The pre-made designs guided little hands, and even the most basic patterns looked dazzling once the light shone through. It gave kids the thrill of making something beautiful and unique. No crayons, no markers, but colors that glowed even without lights. Of course, parents had their gripes. Those sharp little pegs were murder to step on barefoot, and the bulbs could get uncomfortably hot if left running too long. Still, none of that mattered when the lights dimmed and a glowing clown, butterfly, or spaceship came to life on the screen. Lite-Brite was more than a toy. It was an early taste of creativity meeting technology. And even now, that colorful glow can instantly transport anyone who played with it back to the wonder of a childhood Christmas morning. If Barbie was the queen of the toy aisle, then G.I. Joe was undoubtedly the king. When Hasbro launched him in 1964, he didn't just show up as another toy, he redefined the entire category. Before Joe, dolls were seen strictly as girls' toys. Hasbro flipped the script with one clever label, the action figure. That single rebrand opened the door for boys to dive into the world of imaginative roleplay without the stigma. The original G.I. Joes were impressive, a full 12 inches tall, fully articulated, and built for customization. Kids could swap out uniforms, gear him up as a soldier, a sailor, or an Air Force pilot, and send him straight into larger-than-life adventures. In the 1960s, with war films, comics, and military themes dominating pop culture, Joe felt like a hero pulled right from the big screen. But the 1970s brought change. The Vietnam War shifted attitudes toward military-themed toys, and rising oil prices made producing such large plastic figures costly. Hasbro adapted, downsizing Joe into a 3.75-inch figure and surrounding him with vehicles, playsets, and entire battle scenarios. This move not only kept the line alive, but also made it even more accessible and collectible for kids. At Christmas, unwrapping a G.I. Joe wasn't simply getting a new figure, it was about unlocking a whole universe of adventure. He wasn't just plastic and paint, he was imagination in uniform. No wonder G.I. Joe is still remembered as the original action figure. If you grew up in the 60s or 70s, chances are you knew at least one kid who had an Easy Bake Oven, and they were instantly the star of the neighborhood. Released in 1963 by Kenner, the Easy Bake Oven was exactly what it promised: a toy oven that could actually bake real cakes, cookies, and brownies. And the craziest part? It wasn't powered by fancy heating elements. Nope, it ran on 2 ordinary light bulbs. Somehow, those bulbs got hot enough to cook up a tray of desserts. For kids, it was nothing short of magic. You weren't just pretending to bake, you were producing real, edible treats. Sure, the results could be a little uneven, sometimes gooey, sometimes a bit crunchy, but none of that mattered. The real joy came from the independence. For the first time, you didn't need mom or dad to preheat the oven or hover over your shoulder. You were the chef, mixing, pouring, and serving up your very own creations. Of course, parents occasionally raised eyebrows. Burns were possible. The little pans got scorching hot, and let's just say food safety wasn't always guaranteed. But those concerns didn't stop the Easy Bake Oven from becoming a holiday must-have. Unwrapping one at Christmas wasn't just about getting another toy. It felt like your first step into the grown-up world, complete with responsibility, creativity, and plenty of sugar. The Easy Bake Oven was more than just fun. It was a rite of passage. Back in the 60s, there was a toy that turned Christmas morning into a racetrack: Hot Wheels. Launched by Mattel in 1968, these weren't just little cars. They were tiny rockets built for fun. Unlike Matchbox cars, which focused on realism, Hot Wheels came in flashy colors, wild designs, and used a special low-friction wheel system that made them ridiculously fast. They didn't just roll, they flew. But the real magic came with the tracks. Those bright orange strips of plastic could snap together into loops, jumps, and death-defying stunts. Kids went from pushing cars across the carpet to engineering full-on speedways in their living rooms. A Hot Wheels starter set under the Christmas tree was a ticket to hours of building, racing, and re-racing, trying to see which car could handle the craziest track. Hot Wheels also had staying power. They partnered with real car brands like Chevrolet and Ford, introduced collector's editions, and kept innovating with new track sets and accessories. For a lot of kids, Hot Wheels were their first taste of car culture, sparking a lifelong love of speed and design. Sure, parents cursed when they stepped on a stray car or tripped over track pieces. But let's be real, none of that mattered. Hot Wheels were iconic and a necessity for every boy growing up. They are popular even today. Some toys fade away, but Hot Wheels, they'll always be goated. Before iPads, before tablets, before touchscreens, there was the Etch-a-Sketch. Released in the US in 1960 by the Ohio Art Company, this little red-framed screen with 2 white knobs was pure magic. Twist one knob to go vertical, the other to go horizontal, and suddenly you were drawing skyscrapers, houses, stick figures, or, let's be honest, a whole lot of wobbly, squiggly lines. And the best part? If you messed up, you just gave it a shake, and poof, a clean slate. What made the Etch-a-Sketch so special was the mix of simplicity and imagination. You weren't holding crayons or markers, you were using mechanics, gears, pulleys, and aluminum powder hidden inside the screen. For kids, it felt futuristic, almost like controlling an early computer. Now, was it easy? Not even close. Diagonal lines were every kid's nightmare, and most masterpieces ended up as abstract doodles. But that didn't matter. The magic was in the process. The hours of twisting knobs, erasing, and starting over. On Christmas morning, unwrapping an Etch-a-Sketch wasn't about becoming Picasso. It was about creativity, experimentation, and the pure joy of making something from nothing. And more than 60 years later, it's still one of the most iconic toys of all time. If there's one toy line that completely defined the late 1970s, it has to be Star Wars action figures. When George Lucas's Galaxy Far, Far Away hit theaters in 1977, kids everywhere wanted a piece of it. The problem? Kenner, the small toy company that snagged the license, wasn't ready. They didn't have time to make figures for Christmas that year, so they came up with a wild solution, the Early Bird Certificate Package. Basically, it was an empty box with a mail-in promise that the toys would arrive later. And, believe it or not, parents bought it. Kids waited months just to finally get their hands on them. That's how strong Star Wars fever was. When the figures finally arrived, they were unlike anything before. These weren't generic army men or cowboys. This was the one and only Luke Skywalker and other fan favorites like Princess Leia, Darth Vader, and Han Solo. Suddenly, every kid could bring the movie home and replay battles from the Death Star or invent their own intergalactic adventures. The smaller 3.75-inch scale was genius too, because it meant Kenner could make playsets, ships, and vehicles, from the X-Wing to the Millennium Falcon, all sized perfectly for those figures. By Christmas of 1978, Star Wars figures were a childhood milestone. Kids weren't unwrapping plastic. They were unwrapping doorways to adventures that felt bigger than life. And decades later, the magic hasn't faded. Star Wars toys didn't just capture imaginations, they rewrote the rulebook for the entire toy industry. After exploring galaxies with Star Wars figures and building your very own racetracks, it's time to slow things down with something a little simpler, the Viewmaster. First created in the late 1930s, it truly hit its peak in the 1960s, becoming a must-have toy for kids everywhere. At first glance, it looked like a chunky pair of toy binoculars, but slide in one of those cardboard reels, hold it up to the light, and suddenly a new world made of colorful 3D images that felt almost magical. For kids of the 60s and 70s, the Viewmaster was an experience. It was a window into places they might never see. The reels covered everything from nature scenes and famous landmarks to TV shows and movie tie-ins. Each click of the lever revealed a new picture, like a private slideshow that fit in the palm of your hand. Christmas mornings with a Viewmaster meant trading reels with friends, almost a snippet into the modern world, clicking through your favorites and traveling the world without leaving the living room. Simple, affordable, and endlessly fascinating. It proved that sometimes the quietest toys could spark the biggest imagination. If there was one toy tough enough to survive any backyard adventure, it was Tonka trucks. Built from heavy steel with real rubber tires, these were more than mere toys. They felt like miniature construction machines. Whether it was a dump truck, bulldozer, or cement mixer, a Tonka could haul, dig, and crash its way through endless afternoons of play. By the 1960s and 70s, Tonka had become the gold standard for kids who loved building and smashing. And crashing was half the fun, because unlike fragile plastic toys, a Tonka could take the hits. A few dents and scratches didn't ruin them. They gave the trucks character, like battle scars from the sandbox. On Christmas morning, unwrapping a shiny new Tonka meant racing to the yard, loading it with dirt, rocks, or anything you could get your hands on. They weren't just props for imagination, they were the centerpiece of backyard construction sites. The best part? They lasted. Many families still have their old Tonkas tucked away, a little rusted maybe, but still rolling strong and holding countless memories. Built tough, built to last, Tonka was a catalyst to creativity, a childhood workhorse. Switching from rugged trucks to something a little more artistic, 1965 brought kids the Spirograph, a drawing toy that turned pens and paper into intricate works of art. Using plastic gears, rings, and wheels, kids could trace patterns that formed dazzling, kaleidoscope-like designs. The results looked so polished and precise, it was hard to believe they came from a child's hand. What made Spirograph stand out was its accessibility. You didn't need to be good at drawing. You just had to set the gear in place, grab a pen, and start tracing. Instantly, spirals and loops emerged, creating mesmerizing designs that felt part math, part magic. For many kids, it was their first taste of combining creativity with mechanics. On Christmas morning, a Spirograph set meant hours of quiet concentration, layering colors, experimenting with shapes, and filling notebooks with page after page of patterns. It wasn't about competition or noise, it was about the simple joy of creation. While it might not have had the flash of Hot Wheels or the cultural weight of Star Wars figures, Spirograph became a beloved classic. Sometimes the most enduring toys are the ones that quietly spark imagination. Half a century before voice assistants and talking gadgets, there was Chatty Cathy, one of the first dolls that could actually speak. Released by Mattel in 1960, she looked like a typical doll, but the magic was in her back. Pull the string, and a hidden phonograph record played one of several pre-recorded phrases, from sweet declarations like "I love you" to playful requests like "please take me with you." For kids at the time, it was nothing short of amazing. The innovation made Chatty Cathy an instant hit. Suddenly, dolls weren't just silent companions, they felt like real-life friends. Cathy could interact, respond, and feel more lifelike. That sense of connection struck a chord, and Cathy quickly became the second best-selling doll of the decade, right behind Barbie. Of course, not everything aged perfectly. Over time, her once clear voice could turn a little distorted, which made her sound more eerie than endearing. But for children in the 1960s, that didn't matter. On Christmas morning, the excitement of hearing her first phrase made you believe in magic. It was a toy brought to life, and that little spark of personality is what made her unforgettable. If there was ever a toy that turned living rooms into miniature boxing arenas, it was Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Released in 1964 by Mark's Toys, this colorful brawler pitted the red rocker against the blue bomber in a plastic ring, each controlled by joysticks and buttons. The goal was simple, but oh so satisfying. Throw quick jabs and uppercuts until you landed the perfect hit that sent your opponent's head popping up in defeat. What made it special was how interactive it felt. Unlike other toys where you just watched the action, here you were calling the shots, maneuvering your fighter, and trading blows. The moment that the plastic head snapped back with a loud click, victory felt real. On Christmas morning, Rock'em Sock'em Robots guaranteed noise, laughter, and a few heated rematches. Siblings, cousins, and even parents got pulled into the chaos, each wanting bragging rights as the household champ. It was fast, fun, and just the right kind of competitive. Decades later, those blocky little robots are still remembered with fondness. Proof that even the simplest ideas done right, just two plastic fighters in a ring, can pack the hardest punch. Sometimes, the simplest toys end up being the most unforgettable, and the Slinky is the perfect example. First invented in the 1940s, this humble coiled spring exploded back into popularity in the 1960s, when it became a holiday must-have all over again. It didn't need batteries or fancy gimmicks, it just walked down the stairs, across the floor, even from hand to hand, and somehow, that simple motion was endlessly fascinating. Part of the appeal was its universality. Any kid could pick it up and play without instructions. Just set it on the top step, give it a nudge, and watch it tumble in a hypnotic rhythm. Parents loved it because it was cheap and durable, while kids loved the challenge of seeing if theirs could make it all the way down the staircase without stopping. Advertising helped too. The famous jingle, "It's Slinky, for fun, it's a wonderful toy," made the spring a pop culture star, echoing through TV commercials and playground chants. Slinky wasn't flashy, but it was pure magic, a strip of metal turned into hours of fun, proving that the most timeless toys are often the simplest ones. Released in 1976, Stretch wasn't your typical action figure. Instead of stiff plastic, he was made of a squishy latex shell filled with a gooey, elastic substance that let kids pull his arms, legs, and torso to unbelievable lengths before he slowly snapped back into shape. What made Stretch so fun was the challenge. Most 70s action figures came with accessories or vehicles, but Stretch was all about testing limits. Could you stretch him across the room? Could two kids pull in opposite directions without breaking him? Of course, there was also the forbidden curiosity. What was inside? Many kids eventually found out the hard way, leaving behind a sticky mess parents definitely didn't appreciate. The real magic of Stretch Armstrong was how unique he felt. He wasn't about storytelling or copying a movie character, he was about pure hands-on play. You didn't just imagine his powers, you experienced them every time you stretched him to the max. Some toys feel futuristic the moment you pick them up, and Stretch Armstrong was one of them. Decades later, Stretch still holds a place in toy history as one of the strangest, most unforgettable creations of the 1970s. Before screens and gadgets, building toys like Tinker Toys and Lincoln Logs gave kids the power to create entire worlds with their own hands. No flashing lights, no batteries, just simple wooden pieces that turned imagination into reality. Tinker Toys came with rods and spools that slotted together in endless ways. A windmill today, a Ferris wheel tomorrow, the only limit was your creativity. Lincoln Logs, with their notched wooden beams, offered something different, the charm of the frontier. Kids could stack them into cabins, forts, or whole little towns, sparking cowboy and pioneer adventures on living room floors. The real magic of these toys wasn't just in the finished build, but in the process itself. They taught patience, problem solving, and often teamwork when siblings or friends joined in. Parents loved that they blended fun with a bit of learning. essentially being sneaky teaching tools disguised as play. By the 1960s and 70s, both Tinker Toys and Lincoln Logs had become staples under the Christmas tree, and because they were sturdy and timeless, they often got passed down, forming unbreakable bonds and connecting generations through play. Proof that sometimes the simplicity itself is what makes the most lasting memories. Of all the toys to ever hit store shelves, none was stranger or funnier than the Pet Rock. In 1975, kids really were unwrapping little cardboard boxes with air holes, only to find a perfectly ordinary rock inside, and somehow it became a national craze. The genius behind it was Gary Dahl, an advertising executive who saw the joke and ran with it. Marketed as the perfect pet, the Pet Rock didn't eat, didn't need walks, and definitely didn't make a mess. Each one even came with a tongue-in-cheek instruction manual explaining how to teach it tricks like sit and stay. Astonishingly, most rocks passed with flying colors. At just $3.95, the Pet Rock was cheap, funny, and weirdly appealing. Millions sold in less than a year, making Dahl a millionaire almost overnight. Parents loved the low cost, kids loved the novelty, and everyone got in on the joke. Of course, the fad burned out quickly. By 1976, the Pet Rock was more punchline than phenomenon, but its legacy stuck. You didn't need to make the most complicated or culture-breaking product. It was one of the cleverest promotion stunts of all time, proof that ingenious marketing can make even a rock one of the most beloved toys of all time. The raw, imagination-driven toys turn out to be the most enduring, and Play-Doh is proof of that. Funny enough, it wasn't even made for kids at first. It started life in the 1950s as a wallpaper cleaner. But once children discovered how fun it was to squish, roll, and shape, its fate changed completely. By the 1960s, Play-Doh was everywhere. The creators teamed up with schools and children's TV programs like Captain Kangaroo, and soon those colorful tubs became a fixture in classrooms and living rooms across America. What set Play-Doh apart wasn't just its bright colors or soft, pliable texture. It was the limitless creativity it inspired. Kids could sculpt birthday cakes, animals, cars, or entire imaginary worlds. And when the colors inevitably got mixed into that iconic grayish blob, it didn't matter. You just opened a fresh tub and started again. In the 60s and 70s, Play-Doh established itself as not just a plaything, it was a creative outlet that let children bring their wildest ideas to life. Decades later, that same magic still lingers. Few toys from the era captured imagination so simply, yet so completely. By the mid-70s, toys were starting to get a futuristic edge, and nothing captured that better than Pong. Long before Xbox, PlayStation, or Nintendo, Pong was the home console that launched the video game revolution. Released in 1975, it brought electronic gaming straight into living rooms across America. The concept was simple: 2 paddles, a bouncing dot, and a black screen, basically digital ping pong. But for kids back then, it was revolutionary. Play wasn't just about action figures or board games anymore. It was interactive, competitive, and endlessly replayable. Families crowded around the TV, taking turns in heated matches that, by today's standards, look hilariously basic. Pong wasn't just a toy, it was the spark for an entire new entertainment era. It paved the way for arcades, home gaming consoles, and eventually the massive gaming industry we know today. Owning a Pong console in the 70s felt like holding the future in your hands. It proved that toys didn't need to be plastic or plush. They could be pixels, sounds, and simple gameplay, and still captivate millions. For a generation, Pong was beyond just a game. It was the beginning of something entirely new. Not every 70s toy became a household name like Barbie or Hot Wheels, but some found a fiercely devoted following, and Micronauts were exactly that. Released in 1976 by Mego, these small, highly posable action figures felt futuristic and unlike anything else on toy shelves. What made Micronauts so special was their interchangeability. Kids could swap limbs, attach vehicles, and combine pieces from different sets to invent entirely new creations. Part action figure, part construction toy, they offered endless possibilities for imaginative play. Their sleek sci-fi aesthetic hit at the perfect time, as the late 70s space craze was just taking off, feeding kids' fascination with galactic adventures. While Micronauts never reached the cultural dominance of G.I. Joe or Star Wars figures, they were quietly revolutionary. Their innovative design inspired future toy lines and even led to a cult-following Marvel comic series. By the late 70s, Micronauts acted as a bridge between the creative construction toys of the 60s and the blockbuster licensed brands that were about to explode. For the kids who owned them, Micronauts were a portal to imagination and into entire universes, ready to be built, reimagined, and explored right in their own bedrooms. If there's one toy that perfectly captures the magic of 1970s Christmas mornings, it has to be the Millennium Falcon playset. After the 1977 release of Star Wars: A New Hope, the phenomenon was unstoppable. Kids weren't just watching Han Solo, Chewbacca, and the Rebel Alliance on the big screen. They wanted to step into that galaxy themselves. Kenner, the company behind the original Star Wars toys, delivered in a big way. The Millennium Falcon wasn't just a spaceship, it was the spaceship. The playset was packed with movie-inspired details: a cockpit for Han and Chewie, a hidden smuggling compartment, a landing ramp, and even a training ball for Jedi practice. Every nook and cranny encouraged imaginative play, making the Falcon feel alive and full of adventure. What made it legendary was how it connected the whole Star Wars action figure line. Kids could load Luke, Leia, Darth Vader, and stormtroopers aboard and recreate iconic scenes or invent entirely new interstellar battles. Suddenly, the living room became a galaxy far, far away. For an entire generation, owning the Millennium Falcon meant a way to carry the Star Wars universe home. Truly a dream come true for anyone who grew up watching lightsaber battles on the big screen. Even today, vintage Falcons are collector's treasures, proof that this wasn't just play, it was a cultural milestone. The Falcon wasn't just a playset, it was the ultimate gateway to adventure. From simple dolls, blocks, and trucks to intergalactic starships, 2 decades of imagination had launched kids straight into the cosmos. If you loved revisiting these classic inventions, check out the next video that dives into the 13 most dangerous old car features that no longer exist.